Welcome to Miami and our special coverage here on ABC News Live of the first Democratic primary debate. Now in the can. Night 2 of this debate doubleheader has just wrapped up. I'm here with our White House reporter, Rachel Scott. There were a lot of breakout moments, huge emotional moments, Rachel, some surprises in there as well. A lot of winners and losers to pick tonight. And over this historic two-night event, the first time ever we've seen so many candidates in a Democratic primary debate.
Yeah, race, healthcare, Donald Trump, all major issues that were the focus tonight. They captivated that stage tonight and were talked about. So lots to break down here.
And if you didn't catch the whole debate, we're going to have headlines for you coming up, some great analysis. But first, we want to start with some hot takes. Who were the winners and the losers tonight? We know our friends at 538 right now are busy crunching those numbers, doing their polling. Much more on that to come. But we have with us someone who is in the debate room, Miranda Renteria, who is a Democratic strategist, was the political director for Hillary Clinton's campaign, is here. What was it like in there tonight, Amanda?
A lot of energy going on.
It was a lot more energy tonight.
And you certainly saw it start off pretty quickly, and the real crowd was engaged the entire time as well. So people were shifted in their seats throughout it all.
If you had to name a #1 winner in the debate tonight, everybody's asking about that. Who would you say?
Senator Harris, no doubt. I mean, you saw a prosecutor come and be a prosecutor and have just lean in all kinds of ways tonight.
She sure did. She broke up what she called a food fight among the men that were flanking both sides of her as there was some arguing. I was also struck, guys, by how the former Vice President Joe Biden was forced to play defense tonight. I kind of give him sort of a middle ground grade in all this. I think he struggled. He was very backward looking, I found at times, so the Obama record. And Bernie Sanders as well was playing defense on some of his policies.
Yeah, and I think this is the point, right? I mean, and tonight it was the generational divide that you saw. And they wanted, the younger candidates were asking them to pass that torch. And so when you have older candidates on the stage, they are forced to defend years, decades-long records. And you saw that tonight. You saw Senator Sanders do it. You saw the former vice president do it, where he was sitting there defending, stances.
Was there a clear loser tonight, Amanda? Can you say? Was there, someone who came into this maybe worse off than perhaps they started in this debate process?
I think people are going to take a look at this debate, and every single campaign is going to really think about it, particularly those candidates that have a record, because what you saw tonight is people came with their research on past votes, and they came in hard, surprised some people about the knowledge they had and knew and leaned in a way. So I got to tell you, anyone that's had votes are going to be looking tonight with all that research.
There were, I think, 146 years combined of political experience on that stage. That's a lot of political record to dig through. We're going to get into some of the substance of what happened in tonight's debate coming up. Take a closer look at those winners and losers. But first, I want to go to our reporter, Avery Harper. She's on the spin room floor here where the candidates will come out to defend their performance, talk about their performance. Hey, Avery, great to see you. There's one person we've learned who's not going to come to the spin room tonight. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's Joe Biden. Joe Biden will not be coming to the spin room. I just spoke with some campaign officials to see if those plans are still in motion, and he's still not going to be here. But I want to show you exactly what's going on here. You can see a lot of those journalists who are here. They're all lining up. Everyone's eyes are focused on that door that's in the distance. You can see a green exit sign right above it, because that is where all of those candidates are going to make their way into the spin room. I do want to take you over here to show you a little bit of what's going on the rest of the floor here. You can see all those candidates, all those campaigns, they have their signs here, and that's how all those journalists know exactly where those candidates and their campaigns are. Again, all those folks are going to be trying to frame their candidate as the winner of the debate. Any gaffes that were made on stage, those people are going to be deflecting those questions from reporters. And so lots of candidates that we're looking forward to seeing tonight, namely Kamala Harris. A lot of passionate responses from her tonight on the debate stage. So we'll be here on the debates, on the spin room floor, to get you all of those moments as they start to happen. Back to you guys.
All right, we're excited to see them. We know you're going to be getting that microphone in there, Avery, asking those tough questions. And we should say, guys, that it takes the candidates a little while to get over here. You raced over pretty quickly, but the debate venue is actually a few hundred yards on the other side of this complex. Let's do a quick rocket round, shall we, of the debate field. field tonight. Let's first put up for folks who was on the stage, where they were positioned. We talked a lot about the three polling frontrunners, if you will. We're in the middle. Joe Biden, the former Vice President, Bernie Sanders, of course, there, Pete Buttigieg. But all the way out to the wings, we had Eric Swalwell, Marianne Williamson. Let's start with her. She's a new age author. She sort of, Amanda, introduced herself to the country tonight, and she was forceful.
She was, and it started out where, the crowd really wanted to listen to her. They gave her a couple of cheers here and there. Towards the end, it was a little bit off, I think, is probably what I'd say about her. But really, the crowd was quite interested and quiet and listening during those opening remarks.
She was tapped into that emotion around the immigration debate right now. She accused the Trump administration of state-sponsored child abuse.
Yeah, very passionate about it. But again, this is an issue. Tonight, the Trump campaign is essentially celebrating this right now, and mainly because of how these candidates answered on the issue of health care, providing health care to undocumented immigrants. This is something that the Trump campaign is going to use for their advantage when it comes to getting people to vote for Republicans.
Let's move down the line. John Hickenlooper, the former governor of Colorado, was next. He was one of these guys, Amanda, that we saw for the past few days declare themselves the truth tellers in all of this, pushing back, ganging up with some of the other moderates against Bernie Sanders.
He was quiet today, though. He was a little bit back from his mic, just didn't quite have the leaning in the way that I saw in California. A little bit different today, a little quieter for me.
All right, we had Andrew Yang next to him tonight. He was the only one on stage, guys, who didn't wear a tie, pushing that $1,000 guaranteed salary for all Americans, which was greeted with some skepticism by the anchors. Pete Buttigieg is someone who really had a moment tonight. His first big debate, someone that speaks 5 languages, someone that has 7 years of executive experience. What did you think about his performance, Amanda?
It was great. His sincerity around the policing issue really did come out. He knew he was going to have that moment, and I think
shooting of an unarmed black man that really engulfed his campaign.
Right, and people were wondering, is that it of Mayor Pete? And tonight he actually showed a real sincerity and a way to have that kind of discussion. And I have to say the religious hypocrisy statement that he made was incredibly powerful in the room.
And what a contrast with the man next to him, Rachel, Joe Biden, someone that the Trump team sees as perhaps their biggest threat. The former vice president was somewhat reserved tonight. His team told us ahead of time they were going to let Joe be Joe, but he seemed a little bit cautious, a little bit tentative, even cutting himself off at points there in responses.
Yeah, the former vice president was on defense tonight. And again, I mean, he was hit hard on his record. And he was trying to defend it, trying to back it up. But again, I mean, the candidates next to him were calling him out on race comments that he's made in the past. We're commenting about on health care. So he was certainly on the defense tonight.
And Bernie Sanders, front and center, always a big presence on the stage, Amanda. We were wondering how hard on the attack he was going to go. He played a bit of defense on his policies, but he was, I'd sort of give him he's sort of a toss-up. He's still Bernie.
I agree. It was a little bit of a toss-up, and again, I mean, one of the big questions with Bernie is what's new,
right?
And
is he expanding that base of supporters?
And is he talking about things in a different way? Is his style changing? Are his examples changing? And I didn't think he brought anything new, and in fact was a little bit more reserved than normal.
Did he change any minds? We shall see. He leaves here maybe unharmed. We've said already at the top of the show here, the woman of the night is Kamala Harris, the senator from California. She came out touting these really what I would call mother moments. Rachel, this moment, she painted a picture of a young mom outside an emergency room with her hand on her feverish child's forehead seeking medical care. Very poignant touches to her case tonight.
Yeah, Devin, this is what happens when a prosecutor is on the debate stage. She commanded the room tonight. She took advantage of those moments. She painted a picture. Her campaign was there to back her up, even tweeting photos of her as a child when she called out those moments. So, again, a very, very powerful moment and colorful moment for her on the stage tonight.
And one word for Kirsten Gillibrand's performance, the senator from New York next to her.
She was leaning in today.
Leaning in, all right, that's 2 words, but we'll take them, Amanda. She was leaning in. She was, and she seemed to come and try to bring both sides together here in the middle of some of these debates.
Right? She was bringing it together, and she again, that women's voice, she certainly was on brand.
And it was neat to see those women, really for the first time, so many women on these debate stages these past 2 nights, which has really been a marker for this debate. We've talked about Michael Bennet, the young senator from Colorado. To her left, he was certainly in there swinging some punches tonight. And how about Eric Swalwell, the other man of the night, young congressman from California who coined this phrase, guys, tonight, take back the torch.
He did, and he started off very early, saying we're gonna move this thing faster. It's gonna be energetic, and we're gonna get into it. And I thought, again, aligned with moving the torch.
Yeah, I think everyone was waiting to see where he was going with that line.
Yep.
He was rattling off this quote. Everybody was looking around like, okay, where is he going with this? And then he said, oh, Joe Biden said it, so why don't we pass the torch on? So it was interesting.
And Joe Biden, by the way, said he's not giving up the torch, which certainly was emblematic of this cultural divide. Let's take a look now at Michael Bennet, the former Colorado senator, on the floor right now, who's talking about his debate performance tonight.
People from it, that has to change.
Senator, you mentioned Bernie Sanders. Party is getting pulled too far to the left.
I wouldn't say that. I think actually spending time in Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina, what I'm hearing from people is the same thing that I'm hearing from people in Colorado, Democrats, which is that they don't want a plan that takes their health insurance away. They want to have universal coverage. They want to have choice. By the way, they're also, and that's what, and so I think the people that form the base of the Democratic Party are not in the same position as some of the people that are representing these kinds of plans.
You said they're very satisfied with the amount of time you spent tonight? Your mother coming back over from the Holocaust to what's going on at the border right now. Do you think that's an accurate comparison?
Well, I think it's an accurate comparison. What I said was that she had been separated from her parents, and that affected her whole life. That's affected my life.
Question, and people will not have to pay any premiums, and they'll not have to pay any deductibles, and they're going to have to pay any co-payments. And frankly, I think the time is long overdue for the United States to join every other country and say healthcare is a right, whether you're poor, whether
the middle class.
People will be paying. The answer is yes, but people will be paying less for healthcare.
Can there be a democratic socialist in the Oval Office, Senator Sanders? Can there be a democratic socialist in the Oval Office?
Well, we're going to end. I'll tell you what we are. How's you doing on time? We're okay? Right here. Okay. What we are going to end is corporate socialism. And one of the points I didn't get a chance to answer today is that right now we have, in many ways, a socialist society. What do you think the bailout of Wall Street was about? Trillions of dollars went to dishonest people who nearly destroyed the economy. What do you think we're doing right now in terms of the fossil fuel industry? Hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies and in tax breaks. So I believe that maybe, I remember what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said. And what he said is we have socialism for the rich, but rugged free enterprise capitalism for the poor.
Can Joe
Biden still be called the presumptive nominee?
All right, and you see Senator Bernie Sanders there defending his performance tonight. And before we let you go, Amanda Renteria, where does this whole primary debate season go from here? What's next for this raucous field of 20-plus candidates?
Well, everyone's going to really take a look at what they did tonight. You're going to start to see different differentiation actually on the trail now, because the door has opened up to start to differentiate yourself, and people now are knowing all the different candidates. So you are going to see a few more punches out on the campaign trail.
Open the floodgates to some contrast, some punches. Thank you so much, Amanda Renteria, Democratic strategist, former political director for Hillary Clinton. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We will see you out there. Good luck tomorrow in Nevada. And I want to bring in our political director, Rick Klein, who's been tracking all things debate these past 24, 48 hours. Rick, we've been asking everybody, who is your big winner tonight?
Kamala Harris clearly owns the night. It's rare when you watch a debate that I think it becomes that evident, and it wasn't just one moment. It was several moments where she connected her biography to her campaign message and found a way to break through on a message that matters to a lot of Americans, insisting on the ability to bring this argument directly to Joe Biden on the issue of race. But I thought she was terrific on immigration, on health care, staking out a left to center, more than center-left position, which is a little bit risky, but I think maybe positioning herself as an alternative to the frontrunners, those two older white men in the middle.
She sure did stand out, and the moment you're talking about may have been the moment of the debate when she went toe-to-toe with former Vice President Joe Biden on the issue of race over this controversy of his comments defending segregationist senators over the past week or so. Let's take a listen to that exchange and then talk to Rick about it.
And I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden. I do not believe you are a racist, and I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. That is not true, number one. Number two, if we want to have this campaign litigated on who supports civil rights and whether I did or not, I'm happy to do that.
Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was
a
failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
I have supported the ERA.
Quite a moment, the moment of the night. We're joined now by one of the people on that stage, former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper. What was it like watching somebody you know well, you know Vice President Biden pretty well, go toe-to-toe with Kamala Harris? Do you think her attacks were fair?
I think her attacks were pointed and direct. I think he answered them the way he would. You know, I was more focused on making sure that we got this point out that socialism isn't going to win for this party if we're going to really make sure we beat Trump. And I kept recognizing that, and again, so many people want to have this single payer for all and take away, you know, private insurance from 180 million people. Socialism is not going to work. That's not what we're in Colorado.
A group of you guys sort of ganged up on Bernie Sanders there. These self-described truth tellers, if you will. Your colleague Michael Bennet was up there in the mix. Some of the candidates last night in night one were doing the same thing. How does this debate shake out? Who wins this big ideas versus a more moderate approach debate?
My feeling is that over time, voters in places like Iowa, New Hampshire, they're pragmatists. South Carolina, Nevada, I think they're going to look for reasonable solutions that are not going to jeopardize their chance of beating Trump. And I look at what we've done in Colorado, near universal background checks. We passed universal background checks. We became the #1 economy in the country for the last 3 years. You know, big government, you don't need big government to do big things. And if we don't separate ourselves from socialism, we run the real risk of helping to reelect the worst president in this country's history, in my opinion.
Governor, can I just ask a quick question? That question that was raised to everyone, the hands went up on whether people would support abolishing private insurance. I saw 2 hands on that stage, Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris. We know Bernie Sanders calls himself a democratic socialist. Is Kamala Harris a socialist if she supports policy like that?
Well, I'm not calling them a socialist, and I don't even call Bernie Sanders a socialist.
He calls himself that.
Yeah, he can describe what he wants. My point is that the Democrats have to distance themselves from this notion, and they've got to be very clear that they are not socialists, because we know from the midterms that the Republicans are going to call everybody a socialist. They're already doing it. And if we don't clearly say we're not, they're going to paint us into a corner, and we jeopardize, again, helping to reelect one of the worst presidents in American history.
Who won tonight?
You know, I didn't see a winner. I thought that it was, obviously some people got more time than others. Some people had, they were asked the questions that they wanted. But I think overall, it was a good reflection of the talent that's up there. I've never been on a debate stage with 10 people that were, such a different cross-section of backgrounds and skills, and all talented.
It certainly is an impressive field. Governor Hickenlooper, thank you so much for stopping by. Great to see you. We'll let you work the spin room now.
You bet.
Thank you so much. And Rick,
thank you. I love
Klein
your
here as well.
Former aide Michael Bennett up there next to you. That must have been fun.
That's The darndest thing is that here we work together so long. Michael Bennet's one of the smartest people in America. I think he's the best senator. I really do. But here's my former chief of staff, and we're on a debate stage. You know, his
Did
kids
you guys
watching,
trade
my
glances?
son's watching. Oh yeah, of course.
Who'd have thunk?
Who'd have thunk?
All right, guys. Thanks so
Governor.
much. Thanks, Governor. And Rick, as the governor was saying there about that big moment, which we played just a little while ago, the Kamala Harris moment, I want to get your take on that because it did dominate so much of the conversation on social right now, as well as people are sort of digesting what happened here. Did Joe Biden adequately answer that question? He seemed to put it to bed last week with Cory Booker, but then today Kamala Harris resurrected it.
Yeah, and look, it's a critique that you can make based on his record, based on the recent comments, as well as the work in the 1970s, where he worked with some of these senators to oppose federally court-ordered busing in his home state of Delaware. And the quotes are out there for people to see. Our fact checks running with all of these things right now at abcnews.com, and it's a difficult answer for him. First of all, the idea that he even has a position on busing, that's an issue that hasn't come up for 40-something years. That speaks, I think, to one of the
She's
flaws.
tweeting pictures of herself being bused
As a small
to schools.
child.
Right.
As a small child. And I think for Senator Harris, look, she obviously has a right and an opportunity to speak about these issues. We saw Cory Booker say basically she accepts what the vice president has said and isn't going to pursue it any further. Senator Harris felt otherwise and was prepared with this. And to me, it didn't come across so much as an attack as it did a personal telling of her own experience.
A generational challenge. We know it energized a lot of her supporters that were watching tonight and hoping for a big performance from Kamala Harris. Our Zoreen Shaw out in California was with a group of those who were watching the debate. Zoreen, how do they feel about her performance tonight?
Hi, Devin. Yeah, we're at Cities in East LA. There were about 20 people here tonight, and I have one of them actually with me here right now. Michelle, I'm going to pull you in just a little bit. You came here tonight, East LA, to this bar. You were actually undecided when you came here. You didn't really know who you were really siding with, and then you heard Kamala Harris. Tell me what went through your head.
Oh, definitely. So it started out pretty neutral. Everybody's doing a great job. But then immediately Kamala sort of distanced herself from the pack. She was giving these very strong, articulate answers. And as a gay, Latina, woman of color, representation like that is really important. I love how she used her personal narrative and her personal story, to shed light what her policy decisions were. And she really, really distanced herself from the rest of the pack. She took jabs when she needed to. She was respectful. She was a very strong speaker. And really, it was very different from the debates I saw yesterday.
Now, one of the people who you really liked in the debates yesterday, you said you loved Elizabeth Warren, and maybe not so much today after seeing Kamala Harris. And tell me a little bit about why. I mean, they both have very different approaches.
Definitely. I think the era of Trump, country club politics is, what these politicians currently in D.C. are utilizing. And I think that the D.C. playbook has sort of been thrown out the window. So we need somebody who's scrappy. We need a fighter like Kamala Harris. And she really proved herself to be that person. The way she took on Joe Biden, the way she took on the rest of her, colleagues up there in the debate. She really set herself apart.
So one of the things you guys can clearly see right now are all the people behind me. They're still out here. You felt that excitement in the room during those moments where Kamala exchanged jabs with Biden. Tell me about what the room felt like and what the reaction was out here.
Definitely. So I think that as soon as she said her 3 a.m. plan, those magical words, it really did something for everybody here in the room. These are the issues that keep Americans up at night. And she did a beautiful job in addressing that. Everybody was cheering at the appropriate times when she came on and she worked her magic. And it was electric. And, everybody here was really cheering her on. And I really was not expecting that. This was quite a surprise, for me.
It seems like. Michelle, thank you so much. Devin, I'm going to toss it back to you.
A big night indeed for Kamala Harris. Zoreen, thanks so much for your reporting there. The candidates are filing into the spin room now. We'll go take a live look at the picture here overhead. A number of them working the crowds now, talking to reporters. Their supporters also flooding the space. You can see it looks like a mosh pit right now here in Miami in the spin room just after the conclusion of this second night of a historic presidential debate. A lot of facts to check tonight as well. We have a full team back in our Washington, D.C. bureau checking some of those claims that were being made made. I want to go now to our chief fact checker, Ben Siegel, our Capitol Hill reporter who's on the case. Ben, give us a sense of some of the things we can expect that you guys will be taking a closer look at tonight.
Well, Devin, you guys said it just now. Senator Harris, a big focus tonight, had her breakout moment, had that big exchange with the former Vice President Joe Biden. We're taking a closer look at that exchange, about what she had to say about busing and the vice president's record. As Rick just mentioned, there's a lot of history around this. You can dig up the quotes from 40 years ago from the vice president. We're going to add some more context to what he was saying and what she was saying. We're also going to take a closer look at her record on immigration as the Attorney General of California. A big issue there. She tried to create some distance between herself and the Obama administration and the vice president. And we're also going to take a look at the cost of prescription drugs. Healthcare, again, a big focus of this debate. It seemed like the first quarter of the 2 hours was spent almost entirely on healthcare. Prescription drugs are a part of that. So we have a whole team behind me. The fact check machine is still going strong. So we're going to come to you later tonight with some more information there.
All right, the fact check machine. We'll be back with you, Ben, to break down some of those checks. Thank you so much. We'll be back here on ABC News Live after a short break, coming to you live from Miami. Special coverage here on ABC News Live of the first presidential Democratic primary debate.
ABC News, straightforward. Okay, let's be straightforward about these facts. More Americans wake up to GMA than any other morning show, period. That's 6 years in a row running, with GMA as America's most watched morning show. And for 2 straight years, GMA has been honored winner of the Emmy for Outstanding Morning Show.
Thank you at home.
Robin, George, Michael, GMA. We get it. In times like these, to be the trusted place more Americans come to start their day, well, let's just say it's an honor and an adrenaline rush. And we know we can't do it without you.
We just want to say how thankful we are.
So thank you for helping make GMA America's most watched morning news show.
Come on now.
We are GMA.
Finally, one last thing. Where would we be without listening?
Damn!
Please include that.
ABC News, straightforward.
As we fly over ground zero.
Almost every home here has sustained damage. Everything has just been wiped out.
Glad you're okay.
Oh, thank you.
You could hear the gunfire just around this wall. So this is one of those checks. Around the corner here are the children. What's your name? Back on the job.
Back in the job.
Help build my country back. How are you? How you doing? Good to see you.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
And welcome back to Miami and our special coverage here on ABC News Live of the first Democratic presidential primary debate is complete. A 2-night event, 20 candidates, 4 hours of questions. It was a bit of a marathon at times, but boy, did we see some surprises. Some candidates had breakout moments. Some candidates maybe sustained a little bit of damage in some of the elbow throwing up there on stage over the past 2 nights. For more on what we saw up there on stage, I want to bring in Andrea Mercado. She's the executive director of the New Florida Majority, which is a grassroots organizing group here in Florida that works with communities, minority communities, women of color, and specifically. Great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here.
Andrea, you were in the room tonight.
I was. Last night
a lot of energy.
Yes, absolutely. Last night I was watching it with 400 women of color not far from here, and tonight to be in the room was exciting to be there.
And you were telling me just a few minutes ago there were a couple of big winners, standout winners for you. You're not endorsing anyone yet, but 2 people sort of stood out.
Well, I mean, I think it was really interesting tonight. We could see that Senator Harris was on fire. I mean, I think in her, from food fight to, and that little girl was me, you know, she was just really standing out. And you could imagine her like going toe to toe with President Trump. And I think, you know, much similar to the way Castro, I think Julian Castro had a really unexpectedly strong, you know, performance last night.
And what was your perception of the three sort of polling frontrunners that came into this debate? So much talk about them at the center of the stage. The three white men there, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, too, on the younger end of the age spectrum. What was your hot take on those three?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sanders was pretty consistent with what his message
You
has been.
expected him, Bernie being Bernie.
Just, you know, just like Senator Warren last night, I think was very consistent in her proposals, in her message. You know, I think really Kamala really, Senator Harris really pushed Vice President Biden on his record. And, you know, I think that that's going to be become a topic of conversation
Did the
for many
millennials
families.
catch your eye at all? We had Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California, one of the youngest candidates on stage. Also Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think different candidates had their moments at different times, but definitely I would say the standout performance this night was Senator Harris.
It sure was for a lot of people. We're seeing that trending on social media right now as well. But there was another moment. I want to stick on this theme of the age divide on stage tonight, Andrea. We saw some of the oldest candidates in this race front and center, also some of the youngest candidates, two millennial candidates. As we just mentioned, they would be the first millennial presidents. And there was a bit of a tiff between Eric Swalwell and Joe Biden. I want to get your reaction to that. Let's take a look.
I was 6 years old when a presidential candidate came to the California Democratic Convention and said, it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans. That candidate was then Senator Joe Biden. Joe Biden was right when he said it was time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans 32 years ago. He's still right today. If we're going to solve the issues of automation, pass the torch. If we're going to solve the issues of climate chaos, pass the torch. If we're going to solve the issue of student loan debt, pass the torch. If we're going to end gun violence for families who are fearful of sending their kids to school, pass the torch.
Vice President, would you like to sing a torch song?
I would. I'm still holding on to that torch. I want to make it clear to you, look, the fact of the matter is what we have to do is make sure that everybody is prepared better to go on to educate for an education.
What was your take on that moment, Andrea?
You know, I mean, I think the most important thing is that candidates that can connect with this country and the moment that our country is going through. So I do think racial justice, issues of racial justice, being able to energize young voters, being able to energize communities of color, that's how we're going to win this election. And I think that Vice President Biden has some work to do in having.
You think he needs to give up the torch?
I think that we're very much in a moment where he might not be the front runner for very long.
Okay,
I mean, I think
we'll
we saw
see.
some really strong performances.
We
over
sure
the last
did
2
tonight.
days.
All right, and smartly said, Andrea Mercado, Executive Director of the New Florida Majority. Thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it. And right now we are listening to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York. She's talking to reporters about her performance tonight. Let's listen in.
Yes, well, you know, I was able to speak directly to America's women and the men who love them about this all-out assault by President Trump and the Republican Party to undermine our reproductive freedoms, our basic human rights and civil rights. And I think it's mind-boggling that in this day and age, we are having a debate on a debate stage of a Democratic primary in 2019 about whether women should have access to reproductive freedom. And frankly, I'm tired of playing defense. I think we should be playing offense. And, you know, the way politics works is the negotiating room, the doors are closed, and women's reproductive freedom is the first thing thrown out the window. And that's how we got to hide. And I disagree with Vice President Biden, as well as others who don't understand that these are the most important women's reproductive freedoms that there is. It goes to our fundamental human rights. And as president, I would never compromise on women's rights when the door is closed.
Why not go after him more directly as Senator Harris did on the issue of race?
Because I was asked about Senator Sanders' comment, not Senator Biden Vice President Biden didn't even talk about it. But the truth is that we need a president who, when that door closes, she will stand up for women's reproductive freedom. And who would you trust? Who would you trust? I've been a fierce advocate for women's reproductive freedom for a decade, and I've been leading the issues on.
All right, let's go now to our Avery Harper, who's on a different part of the spin room floor here. She's talking to one of the youngest candidates on that stage tonight, Andrew Yang, the entrepreneur, the guy who wasn't wearing a tie. Let's listen in.
So, you know, like that, this is just the first of a whole series of debates. Like, I'm thrilled that I had the opportunity to introduce myself to the American people, and I'll have more questions next time, I'm sure.
Was there something intimidating about being on that stage with all of those people who've been doing it for such a long time?
You know, certainly not intimidating in the sense, and one thing you all know is that when you run for president, you end up meeting the other candidates in green rooms and, you know, places in Iowa and New Hampshire, so you actually interact with each other as human beings. And so it's not like when you see them on the stage, it's like, oh, it's like this person I've only seen on TV. Like, you actually see them, like, you know, eating like fish at the fair, you know, or like in a scrum in South Carolina. So certainly that's not intimidating in the least. You know, to the extent there's anything to get used to, it's like the moderator management of the schedule, because, you know, it's like you do have this sense where in order to get a word in edgewise, you just have to start shouting, and that seems like an incredibly, like, you know, presumptuous thing to do, like in some of these contexts. So that's a different dynamic, but it's not like being alongside people that you see on the trail all the time is itself intimidating.
What do you think? Why no time, Mr. Yang?
You know, it's like certainly the goal is to get the message out to the American people, and you know, again, I'm just thrilled I'll have another debate in July.
What are you going to do between now and then?
Thank you, guys. I'm just going to keep on campaigning. We have events all throughout the country, like Yang Gang rallies go like you know, into the thousands, and so we're just going to keep on building the momentum all through the month of July, and then we'll see everyone again in Detroit.
Thank you, guys. Anything over here? Mr. Yang, what's your reaction?
All right, so okay, coming by, stand by.
Out, guys.
All right, there was Andrew Yang, who was on stage tonight, the only one not wearing a tie on the stage, the businessman, introducing himself to the country tonight and his plan for $1,000 guaranteed pay for all Americans. We're about to be joined here by Marianne Williamson, who is also one of the relative newcomers. She's on her way over to join us here on ABC News Live. If you can pan down, we'll see her. She's about to step right in. Marianne, right here. Great to see you again. Devin Dwyer with ABC.
Nice to meet you.
Come on in. Good to see you again. We have, of course, grab the mic.
Thank you.
Congratulations on completing your. Was this your first ever debate?
Yeah.
How'd it go? How'd it feel?
Well, how did it look like it felt? That's a tough situation, and I'm going to practice up on elbowing my way.
And you know our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks, as well.
Thank you.
And we were both struck. We were talking a little bit earlier about your performance. You really forced yourself in there amongst amongst that field of 10 mostly men.
I didn't feel like I did, but I don't know if that's a compliment.
Tell us what it was like. Very few people have been in a stage like that.
Yeah, but I think you can kind of see us up there and you see what it's like. The other candidates are lovely people. I would have loved much more of a conversation about a larger vision for the country. You can't just talk about pieces and think that that's going to make up for people a vision. There's no, and that's not the candidate's fault. And even when I made a comment about plans, it wasn't in reference to the candidates. But I felt very disappointed.
You invoked John Kennedy at one point.
I did, because for that reason, in saying he didn't just talk about how he had these ideas for how we could get to the moon. That would not have inspired people. The ability to inspire people. That's what he said. We're going to the moon, and we're going to do it by the end of this decade. And the reason this is particularly important is because we're dealing with a president who has done something. This is psychological warfare with Donald Trump. This man has reached into the psyche of people, and he has harnessed fear for political purposes. This is very dangerous. You know, he is dealing.
Well, you accused him of state-sponsored crimes.
What do you call kidnapping?
Dealing with these children.
Well, what is kidnapping a crime?
Of course, it's
okay. So if the state does it, what do you call that? And is child abuse a crime? Then it's collective child abuse. You know, Richard Nixon said, if I do it, if the president does it, it's not illegal. But the whole world got, no, you're wrong, Mr. Nixon. And we Americans sometimes, I think we're in a little bit of denial. We are systematically kidnapping children. That's what that was.
Who's most prepared on that stage to beat Donald Trump?
Me.
Is it you?
Yes.
Why?
Because I understand the realm he's working with. Remember, Donald Trump, everybody's talking about their policies, and I'm not saying the policies are not important. He did not win just with policies. This man wins with the power of his personality.
And he talked about that, his slogan.
He had.
I was struck by your answer, though, on what you would do on day one.
Yes.
You said that you would call the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
I think that would actually be my second thing.
Your second thing. I thought maybe you were going to talk about gun safety, gun reform, or something on race, but people are talking about climate change, gun safety reform, immigration. That's the very first thing you would do?
No, the first thing I would do is submit to Congress legislation to establish public funding for political campaigns. And that's what I say every time that I'm asked at a campaign event. And that was one of the moments where I think the nervousness of being up there. But something I would do very quickly, and I think telling it within the context of Jacinda Ardern was kind of lost on the audience. A major aspect of my presidency would be developing a situation in which every child in America, no matter where they are, goes to a school that is a palace of learning, a palace of culture, and palace of the arts. That would be a major core for me, is a major shift in our resources and a realignment of our investment in the direction of children 10 years old and younger.
Who won the debate tonight, in your view?
I hope the American people did. I hope that, this whole thing of winning the debate, that's such a high school conversation. We really need to get beyond that. We need to be talking about what is our vision for the 21st century. And for Democrats, we need to be talking about how all of us are going to work together to defeat him.
And what's next for your campaign?
For my campaign, I'm going to continue to do what I do. Because, when you go to a regular campaign event, you have a chance to actually lay out your vision. And so I will continue doing that. And then we have our next debate next month. And I will certainly practice elbowing my way in and being tougher. This was my first one, and I got some practicing
and now
to do.
You got to work the spin room. So we appreciate you coming by ABC News Live here. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much. Good luck. Good to see you. Thanks so much. Safe travels to you, Marianne Williamson, the author and presidential candidate here on ABC News Live.
One of two tonight that had never held elected office before, but really used the moment to introduce themselves to the country. And I was struck by that. I think both came across as unique. They had different ideas. Both sound different. They don't sound like your typical politicians. And I imagine that resonates well with some people.
And we know a lot of people judge this. They see the outsiders and go, can that person really win? But we forget just 4 years ago, Donald Trump defied all expectations, blew into politics and ended up winning. So anything's possible. We could have President Marianne Williamson. Who knows? But we have a lot of candidates out there to vet. You're looking at a live picture there on the right of the spin room. Very active right now. Great to have Mary Alice with us. We will come back after a short break and check in with our Avery Harper on the floor here. You're watching special coverage on ABC News Live.
ABC News, straightforward. In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
You trust him? I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying?
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
Ismail?
Yes.
David?
David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
right, we're back in Miami here on ABC News Live with special coverage of the second night of this historic two-night Democratic primary debate, kicking off debate season. We've shifted into new gear, and the candidates will roar out of here in a very different dynamic on the campaign trail. Our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks is here. Mary Alice, you were just talking about how it has permeated this spin room right now, how Kamala Harris performed. Everyone is being forced to answer for that.
Everyone is already talking about it. It seems to be the conventional wisdom, if you will, that she had a breakout night. I was just talking to a surrogate for Senator Elizabeth Warren, who obviously was not on the stage tonight, but was last night. And the surrogate, frankly, sounded a little bit nervous, described it as a night that changed the entire contours of the race, thought that she did so well that she might have really changed the balance of things. Obviously, Senator Warren was the one that had been surging in the last few weeks, and the idea that that could switch, and maybe this is going to be Senator Harris's next few weeks of surging. And on the flip side, talking about her good night, a lot of people wondering why former Vice President Joe Biden wasn't more prepared on some of those questions about race and racially charged policies that he has defended in the past.
And we're just finding out now that not only is Joe Biden not coming to the spin room, but Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, is not going to come here tonight. So those are the only two candidates that will not show up here to address the media, to address questions about their performance. That's sort of interesting.
But a lot of people are saying that they thought that Mayor Pete did what he needed to do tonight on that question of that had basically taken him off the campaign trail. We've been talking a lot about how he went home.
Police shooting, diversification of his police force there in South Bend. 26% of South Bend's population, African Americans. Right. But the police force, very low single-digit percentage. He actually threw up his hands when he was asked that question. He said, "I just couldn't do it."
Right, and he's getting a lot of credit online, at least, and actually from one Democratic strategist that I just talked to, for sounding honest and sounding authentic. That's what people say they like about him, and so he didn't waver from that. I don't know. I don't know if that'll be enough to put this issue behind him, but I think he's getting some points for taking it head on, kind of having his answer ready, but also coming across like it was an honest answer.
And one little grace note to Mayor Pete's performance, I will say, is probably is the first time in American history that a presidential candidate in any debate has publicly referenced their husband on stage. He, right out of the gate, was asked about student loan debt. He talked about him and Chasten, his husband, who's become quite popular on social media. They do have a lot of student loan debt. He does have a plan for that, but I was struck by that moment, a small historical moment, even as we talk about the diversification of this field.
He also sounds really different from the other Democrats in the way that he evokes his race. I just talked about we were talking so much about race on the top of my head. His faith. This is something he's done on the campaign trail. Right, he's an Episcopalian. He talks about it on the campaign trail, but he did it again tonight, and that moment really went viral. It took off on Twitter. People seem to respond well when a Democrat is willing to talk about faith. So often it's Republicans that are talking about faith in the public sphere, and that sets him apart from other Democrats in this field and really other Democrats that have run in the last 10 years.
Thanks for the smart analysis, Mary Alice Parks. And let's go now to our Ben Siegel in our Washington, D.C. bureau, who's been doing some fact-checking tonight. A lot of big, lofty claims tonight, Ben. Almost felt like many more than last night. Give us a couple that you've been taking a close look at and that are popping online. Take it away.
Well, Devin, the big one, the moment I think that was very electric, we certainly felt it here in the newsroom, I'm sure you guys felt it in Miami, was that exchange between Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Joe Biden about his history and opposition to busing and integration of schools. That was something that she talked about in very personal terms as her history growing up in California. He, of course, was a young senator at the time, newly arrived to Washington. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about his stance a couple decades ago.
Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
So we took a look at that. We also found something that Joe Biden told a Delaware newspaper in 1975. He just said in that clip, "I did not oppose busing in America." This is what we found. He told the paper, "I oppose busing. It's an asinine concept, the utility of which has never been proven to me." So this is something that he opposed. He was among a number of Northern Democrats from other parts of the country who worked with Southerners, segregationists who were against integration at the time. There was a coalition in the Senate. And let me read to you the next part of that quote. This is sort of how he explained his opposition at the time. This is the real problem with busing. You take people who aren't racist, people who are good citizens, who believe in equal education and opportunity, and you stunt their children's intellectual growth by busing them to an inferior school. So with that, you can kind of see the fear that many white suburbans across America had at that time. That was something that Joe Biden was expressing. Obviously, decades later, Democrats view that much differently, a much different party. Another fact that we took a look at, a statement rather that was made in this debate, obviously healthcare was a very big part of the conversation. Something Bernie Sanders, who's Medicare for All, is sort of dominating these debates, these conversations about healthcare. Here's what he had to say about the cost of prescription drugs.
The function of the healthcare system today is to make billions in profits for the insurance companies. And last year, if you could believe it, while we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and I will lower prescription drug prices in half in this country, top 10 companies made $69 billion in profit.
And we found a stat that really backs up what the senator said. A study in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that in 2016, just a few years ago, the U.S. spent nearly twice as much as 10 high-income countries on medical care and performed less well on population health outcomes. That also has to do with the cost of drugs. Also, people are paying a lot more here. And you can see tonight that sort of underscores some of the urgency in the conversation around changes to this healthcare system. Very different views on that stage. Vice President Biden saying we have to fix the Obamacare system he put into place and tweak it around the edges. That's not good enough for Bernie Sanders and some of the other people running for president in this Democratic field. They want a complete overhaul. So, Devin, as you can see, a lot of different thoughts out there about health care and a lot of claims made tonight that we tried to make sense of here.
You know, a lot of claims are really complex, Ben. I think it's just so easy in our political debate to try to condense these things down and simplify them, but it really does take some diligent reporting, some reading, some self-educating, and we appreciate the work that you've done. And we have Ben's full fact checks on abcnews.com, on the ABC News app. So please educate yourself as you're participating in this debate.
Yeah.
We're trying to help in that process as well.
We were talking about Bernie Sanders there and his pitch on Medicare for All. I was struck that right off the bat, at the top of the debate, he was asked if middle-class Americans would have to pay more in taxes. He didn't want to answer the question. It's not a fun soundbite for any politician to deliver, but he did answer it. He did eventually say yes, but he argued that they would sort of get their money's worth with his health care plan. Still, I think he kind of had to take a big breath and give the real line, and that'll be memorable. People
I will say before we move on, I thought it was an interesting point, because I thought tonight we saw, not just with Bernie Sanders, but particularly with Joe Biden, sort of a hesitation on a number of these questions, which were very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Would you tax the rich at a certain level? Would you allow undocumented immigrants to get health care in this country? You saw Joe Biden sort of inch up his index finger, sort of raise his hand. In fact, he was called out. Did you raise your hand? Didn't you raise your hand?
And I don't know where that hesitation comes from.
Right.
It could be because he wants to appeal to a more moderate voter. He's worried that the party is lurching a little bit to the left. I don't think that he really agrees with all the progressives on their policy prescriptions, but he's worried about looking like he disagrees with them. Or maybe the hesitation comes from not wanting to disagree with President Obama. It is an uncomfortable space for him to have to distance himself from President Obama. He doesn't seem prepared for that, but the questions beg an answer like that so often.
And behind us here, you can see Al's going to zoom out a little bit, and Mary Alice is going to slide over to her left or her right, either way here. As we look behind us, the spin room is in full action behind us. In fact, right here, there's a scrum right in front of our faces. Kirsten Gillibrand is being buried in that mass of reporters. You see a high, wide shot here of the action right now. Let's go down and check in with Avery Harper if we can. I don't know who she's with or where she is, but Avery, I know you have been throwing some elbows. You've got your high heels on instead of your running shoes. We worked this out earlier today.
Yes, I do.
You aren't messing around out there on the floor.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm actually right against the barricades that are keeping some of these candidates away from this press corps that is clamoring to speak with a lot of the candidates that are here. Kamala Harris is just a few feet away from us, so we're hoping that she'll come down. She's been mobbed by reporters, understandably, after her performance tonight. So we're just trying to get her. Let's turn around. We can kind of see exactly what's going on and see all those reporters, all those cameras, all those eyes that are on her as she makes her way through the spin room and kind of talks to a lot of the reporters who are here, who've been waiting all night to hear what she has had to say after that performance. So hopefully she'll come back in the next couple of minutes and we'll be able to speak to her and we'll be able to take it live for you guys. Devin?
All right, Avery Harper for us on the floor tonight. Thank you so much, Avery, for spin room action there. Let's reset a little bit here with Mary Alice. We've got two debates under our belt, Mary Alice. Tonight we saw the second round of 10 candidates take this stage. At some point, they're going to have to merge. We will have to get down to debates where it's just one night, one group of people. How do we start to see, you've covered many campaigns, how do some of these candidates make decisions to start peeling away? Is it way too early? Could we see some drop off in the next few weeks?
Well, there's some thresholds that they're going to have to hit to stay in the debate. To qualify for the later debates in the fall, they're going to have to double the number of grassroots donors that they have, and they're standing in the polls. So that's basically the party's way of saying, if you're not making progress, it's time to bow out, or at least you're not going to be invited back to the debate stage. So there's going to be some candidates that probably struggle to double their placement in the polls, but this close to voting, it's not crazy to ask candidates to start to make 1%, 2%, 3% inroads. We like to say in politics that candidates don't drop out because they want to. No one wants to. It's not fun.
Especially before the first votes
are cast. No, people drop out because they run out of money.
That's right.
And that's just the truth of it. So I imagine that big players like Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, who have deep war chests, they're not going to feel the pressure to drop out anytime soon.
And let's take a look again, if we can, before we go to break, of the field that was on this stage tonight. If you didn't catch the whole debate, we had some of the highlights. You can catch them on abcnews.com as well. But this was the field we saw tonight. A lot of fireworks, a much more dynamic night than the first night. Of course, we've been talking about it all night here. This was Kamala Harris's night. She was just off to the side of Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, some of the veterans on that stage. Great picture there of this crowd. We had two Coloradans, John Hickenlooper and Michael Bennet. We had the youngest candidates in this debate, Pete Buttigieg and Eric Swalwell. In fact, we might be joined shortly here by Eric Swalwell on our stage, but there was a lot to take in tonight. Let's go to a quick break and see if we can come back with Eric Swalwell. You're watching live coverage here on ABC News Live of the primary debates. Stay with us.
ABC News, straightforward.
This Sunday, streaming on ABC News Live.
Celebrate love.
Celebrate life. Celebrate history.
Celebrate pride.
Extraordinary access. Incredible stories.
Celebrate.
Celebrate.
Celebrate Pride. Streaming on ABC News Live this Sunday starting at 11 a.m. Eastern.
We can live free. In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jong-un.
The president.
You trust him?
I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange.
Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Whew.
Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying.
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
Doctors, Batatas, Ismail, David.
Ground Zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite view.
These guys appreciate it.
And we're back on ABC News Live. Special coverage from the first presidential primary debate here in Miami. I'm here with our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks, and one of the presidential candidates who was, we could call you a star of the stage tonight. You had a pretty hot line that went buzzy and viral online afterwards. Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. Great to see you.
Thank you
for coming over.
Yeah, it's nice to have this behind me, my first debate.
And you're holding a torch.
Yeah, that's right.
Of sorts.
Yeah, hopefully one that's passed.
Tell us about that line, how you came up with it. It was, Mary Alice and I were saying, it was once sort of one of the defining moments, I think, of this debate.
Yeah, it was the first one that seemed to put the former vice president on defense.
Well, he was right, the vice president, in 1987 when he said it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans. And I look at the urgency of these issues. You know, I'm of the generation that's paying off our student loan debt. I'm of the generation that sends our kids to school in fear, and of the generation that's going to pay for the cost of inaction on climate. And I just think we have to pass the torch forward to the generation that can lead and bring solutions.
There's a lot of Americans, though, that say they need someone who can govern and do years of experience in Washington, maybe Joe Biden, able to govern.
Yeah. Well, I'm 38 years old. I'm one of the youngest candidates in this race. But I also have 7 years of experience on the House Intelligence Committee, on the Homeland Security Committee, the Judiciary Committee. So I've been in the arena. I'll be day one ready.
What did you make of that back and forth between the former vice president, someone you took on, and your colleague from California, Kamala Harris? It was a pretty heated, emotional moment there.
Yeah. He should just apologize. If he didn't mean it, and I don't believe that that defines who he is, he should just apologize.
Do you think he should just apologize? And did you think that, who won tonight?
Well, I think the American people won because they see, and they're probably frustrated because a lot of people have told me, gosh, I just wanted a few candidates I like. Now we're starting to see so many that are introducing themselves. We hope to, again, just continue to introduce ourselves, show people. My wife and I, we fight insurance companies, we pay my student loan debt, we send our kids to school and worry about their safety. Put a young, experienced father in the White House, and we'll be a voice for those solutions for your family.
You're off to those other states
You were
next.
talking about being a member of Congress, and today there was a big vote in the House to make sure that there was some emergency funding that went down to those border communities, went to some of those detention centers that have been in the news. Obviously, the candidates that were here today missed that vote. Would you have voted for that bill?
No, I would not have. I will not support any effort that does not immediately end these detention centers, reunite children with their families, and gets rid of, once and for all, any for-profit detention facility or prison in America.
But isn't governing making compromises? I mean, there would be no money then going in some emergency fashion to these detention centers.
Well,
don't kids need some of that money now?
Well, I don't think they should be in detention centers. There's so many families, and I went to Homestead. I was the first candidate to go there this week in Florida. It has 3,000 children. There are families in America who those children are either related to or are raising their hands and saying, send them to me. I don't want these children in those facilities. I don't want to enable that anymore.
All right, Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you so much for coming over here on ABC News Live. Hope to see you out there. Thank you, and happy 4th to you as well. Thank you so much, sir. And before you go, I'm being told by the control room, we do want to ask you about the ribbon. You did make a point. If you have staked your campaign, the one issue you would take on first is to end gun violence, and that represents that here in Florida.
You know, this ribbon is really to honor gun violence victims in America. It's my top priority. The signature issue for us is to ban and buy back 15 million assault weapons. No other candidate has a plan to get rid of those assault weapons. It would have saved the lives in Pulse and in Parkland, and I think it just needs boldness from the White House.
A big issue here in Florida.
Yeah, that's
Thanks
right.
again for coming over. Appreciate it. Have a good 4th.
It is such a difference in this presidential cycle compared to even just 4 years ago. Democrats not hesitating on that issue of gun safety. For so long, it was talked about as this third rail in politics. Even those who maybe would have voted in favor of gun safety reforms, hesitant to talk about it. That's just a huge shift. Both nights, they were willing to go there.
All right, let's go over to our A.B. Harper right now. She is with the woman of the night, Kamala Harris of California. Let's listen in.
In front of our camera right now.
Can you take her now? Can you take her now?
Okay, stand by.
You can see Senator Harris is right here. She's getting ready to talk to another news organization. She's setting up. for this interview.
Right, got you. But I have her right.
We've covered a lot of issues, and there are a lot more that I'd like to cover. So, that we have a lot more. Well, I'd like to get more into foreign policy. We didn't really talk about trade tonight, and I think that's a very important issue that we should discuss in depth. So I'm looking forward to many other opportunities to have these conversations.
Were there any surprises from any of the fellow candidates? Any surprises?
Now we can have her.
I didn't really know what to expect, so I can't tell you that there were any surprises.
Come on, guys.
Did you feel like you were the one adult up there?
I don't know yet. We're trying to sort
up
it
there,
out.
and
If she can make it, then
and
she
everyone
will.
has an important voice.
This is your
and had a lot to talk about. That was, about the perspective of the diversity of who we are as a party, and obviously the diversity of our party is about diversity of thought and opinion and experience, in addition to other things.
What do you expect Joe Biden to
Your
apologize?
response to Joe Biden as angry.
Okay, are you ready?
Well, it was more about the hurt, and that's what I was sharing, and those were the words I used, because that's exactly how I felt.
Do you expect him to apologize?
Coming to us any second now.
You ready? You ready to go?
Hear them rapping.
They're coming to you right now.
Anderson, we just had the senator stop by.
Okay, we just spoke with Senator Kamala Harris. She's someone that many folks are saying won the debate tonight. She is here. She's been mobbed by reporters since she entered the floor. You can see her here surrounded by so many journalists from so many different news organizations. She is the last presidential candidate to enter the spin room tonight. You can see her here answering those questions. Two people that we did not see tonight on the spin room floor, Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden, noticeably absent from the spin room floor tonight. But you can see here Senator Kamala Harris taking the opportunity to speak with those journalists here at the close of the spin room evening here. Let's take a listen to what she's saying. She's speaking with some reporters here.
On the issue of in the conversation with Vice President Biden, it was through the lens of that, which is that these segregationists, things like that. So on the issue in the conversation with Vice President Biden, it was through the lens of that, which is that these segregationists pushed policies and really built their careers and reputations off of policies that were about segregation of the races in our country. And it had real consequence. The policy perspective that was opposed to busing had real consequence. I was that little girl. And there are many others around the country who were those little girls and boys who were bused. And so I felt the need to speak truth about that. I think it's important that we as Americans never forget our history, including those dark days of our history. And so that's why I felt the need to talk about it.
We've talked about the difficulty of talking about yourself from your book and presenting that to voters. That you want to talk about policy.
Yeah.
What is it that turned tonight that made you...
And there is Senator Kamala Harris of California talking about her moment of the night, taking on Joe Biden on the issue of race. They had a contentious back and forth there. The former vice president strongly defending his civil rights record, although the senator from California saying she felt hurt by his comments recently. It was an emblematic moment, I think, tonight, Mary Alice, of Kamala Harris's rise into this conversation. She leaves here with some spring in her step in her campaign as she heads back to those early states. She really needed this because she was sort of struggling in the polls a little bit, but this was a good moment for her.
And on the other hand, I think that Joe Biden kind of struggled to answer for his record. There are a lot of people that could have seen this question coming. He's been hit over this stance of his before. It was an old issue from 40 years ago, and he didn't handle the moment very well.
And so he leaves here as well, looking to continue his campaign for the presidency. We saw Bernie being Bernie tonight as well. We saw those two millennial candidates for the first time on the stage. Pete Buttigieg, Eric Swalwell, who was just here with us, the outsiders, Andrew Yang, Marianne Williamson, and the two Coloradans, John Hickenlooper, Michael Bennett there as well. It was a fascinating debate tonight. Great to have you with us, Mary Alice. Before we go, though, we should say that President Trump has been watching this over from Japan, and his campaign, just as a grace note to our coverage tonight, put out a statement that we do want to share with you. The president says this. His team says, Kayleigh McEnany, National Press Secretary, says the cast of characters may have changed, but the second night script was eerily like the first, a 2-hour-long infomercial for President Donald J. Trump's re-election campaign. They feel very confident based on what they saw tonight in use of the S word, we should say, that the Democrats, as they say here, tripped over each other. They call leftist candidates. So boastful is perhaps a way of describing their response after seeing this. Very confident, but it is very, very early in this primary process. A lot of campaign to go, a lot of debate to go. The next time we'll see all these candidates together will be at the end of July in Detroit.
Right, it'll be the next debate. There are 12 in total, so get used to nights like this. We're just getting going.
It is just getting started. We appreciate you joining us for all the highlights and analysis tonight here on ABC News Live. Our thanks to you for joining. Thanks to our team in New York for producing coverage, our team on the ground here in Miami. From Mary Alice Parks, I'm Devin Dwyer. We'll see you tomorrow here on ABC News Live, back in the briefing room, 3:30 Eastern Time. Until then, have a great night.
America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table.
On day one, we take out our executive order pen and we rescind every damn thing on this issue that Trump has done.
Imagine the Parkland kids having as much power in our democracy as the Koch brothers or the NRA.